we are going, and I use the word advisedly, going to be generating electricity cheaper than you can get it from coal, gas, and nuclear. It's just a question of when. There's a lot of debate about when, and I'll give you two sort of bookends of opinions for when. If you believe the chief executive of BP, Tony Hayward, he said in a speech a couple of months ago that solar photovoltaics will never be economic without a technical breakthrough. Who is advising this guy? If you phone around the investment banks where they have analysts studying the solar industry because it's so hot, you won't be told anything like that. You'll be told, you know, different stories for different markets depending on the analysts. But this is our view, us and Sharp and Romag, the manufacturers. Germany will be at grid parity with traditional electricity in 2011. This is without subsidies and feed-in tariffs. And in this country, 2013. Just assuming the kinds of inflation of traditional, I'm sure you're all aware, traditional energy bills have been going up an average of 5% a year for 10 years now. And that's not going to go away anytime soon. So the economics look really good, and that's one of the reasons why the investors are so excited by it. Public opinion, I don't think is, touch wood, is not going to dissipate. It's taking knocks. I mean, people are desperate to believe the comfortable narrative. And so if some group of idiots gets up and you know, tells them that Professor Bloggs at such and such a university has been maybe playing fast and loose with a few bits of data here and there, you know, and therefore the whole science of climate change is flawed, and indeed these people are conspiring to scaremonger and all this kind of stuff that they're coming up with, then of course it does hit targets. It hits lots of targets. But this stuff isn't going to go away. This is the front cover of Vanity Fair. Julia Roberts and other green icons, a threat graver than terrorism. And you know, that's in the cultural DNA now. And it's in the cultural DNA in the corporate world. This is a full-page ad from The Economist. War on global warming needs more warriors. And the little boy is holding his dad's hand and he's looking up and he's saying, "What did you do in the war on global warming, Dad?" And you think, crikey, Greenpeace or somebody has found a lot of money to take out these ads. It's not. It's a business. It's, in actual fact, a fossil fuel business, Norwegian gas company. And they're having to do this because in order to get brilliant young people to go work for them, this is the kind of way they have to present themselves. And it has to have a certain amount of meaning. In the next 5 years, we're going to see another crunch, the oil crunch. We've got a bit of time to prepare for this one. The challenge is to use the time well. We've got to act now. And here's a very important sentence that all these people signed on to. Don't let the oil crunch catch us out in the way the credit crunch did. So we, at least, think that the oil industry has got its asset assessment wrong in the same way that we now know, blindingly, obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, that the investment banking industry did in the case of the credit crunch. The oil crunch is a deadly serious thing. Again, an uncomfortable narrative. We wish that it were otherwise, and we say in the report, we hope we are wrong with this analysis. But we think that the oil industry is not going to be able to deliver globally the kinds of volumes of oil, flow rates of oil, remotely, that are going to be needed given the way demand is going. And you might say, okay, well great, then we'll just move to energy efficiency and alternatives, it will help. And maybe it will, but there's real risk in here, because one of the worst case analysis nightmares is that what happens is there's this kind of wave of realization around the world, exactly like happened with the credit crunch, where, you know, 1 week, a few people were sticking up their hands, a few maverick economists and a few journalists in that case, and saying, you know what, guys, you've got your risk assessment wrong here. We think this whole house of cards is going to come down. And so all the chief executives, all the senior people in the investment banking industry say, don't be ridiculous, you don't understand, we understand the risk, we've squeezed risk out, we slice and dice, we do all sorts of clever things, all our PhDs in mathematics, we've squeezed the risk out, and stop scaremongering. And this is a picture from their World Energy Outlook that came out just a few days after our first report. And you can see in the blue, the thing to look at here, I can't go into detail, I just want to interest you in reading this stuff and following it if you're new to it. The blue is the crude oil coming from currently producing fields. And they've gone around the world, field by field, plotting out what's going to happen. Look how that collapses. This is not, an environment group. This is the International Energy Agency, and it collapses around now. And of course, being the International Energy Agency, sponsored by these governments, they have to say, well, okay, there are other things we can do. So here are fields yet to be developed. Here are fields yet to be found. Here's non-conventional oil from the tar sands. Here's how we can lift production, and we can squeeze oil out of the gas operations. And maybe we can bring on stream 6 Saudi Arabias of new production within 20 years. And you know what? They don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell of that happening or coming anywhere close. And the point about the energy crisis that would happen is that for many oil consuming countries, as we are now, North Sea production collapsing out there, it would be experienced as an energy famine potentially, because the oil producing countries would be subject to the same kind of wave of realization that they've been culturally over-optimistic. I mean, no one's accusing anyone of lying here. It's just a sort of cultural human failing, over-exuberance. And then they realize that they haven't got perhaps as much as they've been saying, and they start husbanding their resources, using it for their own multi-hundred billion dollar and multi-hundred billion ruble domestic programs. And to make the point, this is Dubai in 1990, with 3 tower blocks in the desert there, and if you can see, just watching the same 3 tower blocks, you can't see in the dark, but that's the same vista in 2007. This stuff is happening apace in many of the main oil producing countries, and they're burning oil in their power plants in order to make this happen. So we have to mobilize fast. In the first report we said, whereas with climate change the Copenhagen thing would require maybe a mobilization rate annually of about 3% replacement of fossil fuels as we engineer this fast but managed withdrawal from fossil fuels. If we're dealing with a peak oil collapse scenario, it's an order of magnitude too slow. And so you might say, well, crikey, that's a real problem, isn't it? But yeah, it is a challenge. But equally, if you look at how fast technologies can be mobilized in times of preparation for war, and forgive me for using the military analogy, but in the late 1930s and 40s, the Americans and the Brits mobilized, particularly the Americans actually, after Pearl Harbor, mobilized so fast tanks and aircraft and all the rest of it. This can be done once you're unified behind the purpose. And I come back again to my point about speed. And here's another Solarcentury installation. We're not even using the roof. The roof is grass. But we've got solar PV and solar thermal along the back and the flanges, or whatever they're called. And that could be, if it's off-site constructed, flat packed, that kind of housing can be put up in a matter of weeks. Solar, as an example of the survival technologies, this is the massive reef you saw in Berlin. It was installed during snowy weather, 5,000 modules, 35 kilometers of cabling, 2.6 tons of central inverters, put up in 10 weeks, connected to the grid, producing electricity. You see what I mean? It's just one member of the family, but this is what can be done. And to end on a positive note, we can find the tipping points. I hope I've made a convincing case for that. Solar is a vital one. It's not a magic one. There are many that we need to find and identify, and if we do that, maybe we can replicate some of these past historic achievements in a sense that will give us a sane and survivable future. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Bye.